Chapter 15. Babe Herman. What was to become the popular perception of the Brooklyn Dodgers, of the Daffy Dodgers, clowns, buffoons, traffic jams on the base paths, madcap fans rooting zealously for chronic losers, began to take shape in the 1920s. Manager Wilbert Robinson, Uncle Robbie, was at least partially responsible for the image. He seemed to watch it all with a certain sense of detachment, as though he might have other, more serious business on his mind. He also seemed genuinely fond of his athletes, like a grandfather with too many rascally grandchildren, bounding mischievously about, sighing at their boyish antics. It was in the spring of 1926 that the most colorful Dodger of them all had reported to Brooklyn's Clearwater training camp. He was tall, slim, light-haired, buck-toothed, 22-year-old slugger who was to become central to more incidents, quiet and bizarre than any other Dodger, and would finally emerge as the embodiment of the total legal of Brooklyn baseball. His name was Floyd Caves Herman, but nobody ever called him anything but Babe. Donald Honig, the Brooklyn Dodgers. Actually, when I was in high school, I was more interested in playing football than baseball. I got into baseball by sheer accident. I mean, and more literally than figuratively. Gus Gleichman, you see, was the playing manager and first baseman of the Edmonton club in the Western Canada League. That was a Class B minor league, pretty fast company in those days. Gus was down here in Southern California in the off-season. It must have been March or April of 1921 when he got into a pretty bad automobile accident. He was driving to Ventura when his car skidded and flipped over, as a result of which Gus wound up with a broken leg. So instead of enjoying a vacation, Gus found himself searching for a first baseman. As far as I was concerned, I was looking forward to finishing school at Glendale High and then going to the University of California at Berkeley that fall on a football scholarship. About 15 colleges had contacted me about playing football, but I had my heart set on Berkeley. A few days after Gus's accident, though, I was in a local sporting goods store, and the owner, Joe Rafferty, says to me, "Hey, do you want to play professional baseball?" "Gee, I don't know," I said. "What are you talking about?" I had something of a reputation as a first baseman because I played the position on a lot of semi-pro teams in the area. So Joe Rafferty, he told me about Gus needing a first baseman and how he's recommended me to Gus. Pretty soon in came Gus himself on crutches, and after we talked a while, he offered me $175 a month to play for Edmonton that season. That was an awful lot of money to me. I hadn't reached my 18th birthday yet. Before I realized he knew what I was doing, I took the contract and signed my name on the dotted line. And I had to go home and tell my dad, which wasn't an easy thing to do. But that evening I braced myself and said, "Dad, I'm going to Canada to play ball. They'll pay me $175 a month, and I'll get a chance to see how good I really am." Dad says. "They don't pay you to play in this world. You stay with me and work, and someday you'll have something." Dad was a building contractor. "Well," I said, "I'd sure like to give it a try." "I won't stop you," he said, "but you watch. Pretty soon you'll be wiring me for money to come home." "No," I said, "if I have to, I'll come home riding in the rails in a boxcar." So off I went. I hit .330 at Edmonton and led the league in triples in batting average, and after the season was over, I was sold to the Detroit Tigers. Detroit sent me to Omaha in the Western League in 1922, where I hit .416. In those days, though, you had to pay your dues and put in 4 or 5 years in the minors before they figured you were ready for the big leagues. So it was 1926 before I got a real chance, and it wasn't with Detroit, but with the Brooklyn Dodgers, who acquired my contract. I made it as a regular with the Dodgers the first year I was with them. 1926, Wilbert Robinson was the manager of the Dodgers then. He had been for many years. Robbie had been a catcher with the old Baltimore Orioles in the 1890s, along with John McGraw, Willie Keeler, Hughie Jennings, and that crew. after he'd been John McGraw's coach and right hand and man with the New York Giants, and then he became the manager of the Dodgers in 1914. In fact, most of the time I was there, we weren't called the Dodgers, we were called the Brooklyn Robins after Uncle Robbie. Despite what you might read, Uncle Robbie wasn't a clown. He was a sound baseball man, a good manager, especially when it comes to handling pitchers. Of course, he had his idiosyncrasies, but who doesn't? He liked to reminisce on the bench and talk about the good old days and what about fishing and hunting. In the off-season, he used to go to Dover Hall, a fishing and hunting place near Brunswick, Georgia, and sometimes he'd get so involved talking about the old Baltimore Orioles or about Dover Hall that he'd forget all about the ball game and forget to give his signs to the third base coach. Not that it mattered all that much. For a while, we had old Joe Kelly as our third base coach. A real nice fellow. Joe had been a teammate of Robbie's on the old Baltimore Orioles and was a great outfielder in his day. But obviously, the only reason he was with us was because Robbie wanted to take care of a longtime friend. For instance, one day, I hit a line drive over the first base. The ball cambered into the Brooklyn bullpen and got tangled up under the benches there. As I was coming into second, I saw Joe Kelly coaching at third base, motioning me to hold up. So I put on the brakes, coaching at third, I put on the brakes and stopped at second. Excuse me, can't read today. But then I saw that the right fielder was still scrambling under the benches is for the ball. So I headed for third, coming into the third. He stopped me again, or I could have scored. "Gee, Joe," I said when I got to third base. "What's going on? You stopped me at second while the outfielder was still trying to get it to the ball." He put his arm around my shoulder and whispered to me, "Babe," he says, "I want to tell you something. Without my glasses, I can't even see who's pitching. But I won't wear glasses on a ball field." "Why not?" I asked. "Pride," he says. We had a catcher named Val Penich who came to us from the Cincinnati Reds in 1929. The first time Robbie decided to use him in a game, he told Val he's catching, so Val goes and puts his gear on. Meanwhile, Robbie's making out the lineup card and turns to me and says, "Hey, babe, how do you spell the new guy's last name?" "Don't you know how to spell it, Robbie?" I said. Robbie thought a minute, and then he mumbled, "The hell with it. I'll put D-Berry to catch." So now he's told two guys they're catching, and when the game starts, it's Val and D-Berry. They both walked up to home plate with their gear on. When they got to the ball, they stopped and looked at each other, a little bit confused. They finally got it straightened out though. I wasn't the world's greatest fielder, as a lot of stories will attest, but I was always a pretty fair country hitter. 350 in 1928, 381 in 1929, and 393 with 35 homers and 130 RBIs in 1930. The year I hit 393, I came into the last day of the season and hitting 397. If I could have gotten three straight hits, it put me at 400. But we played a doubleheader, and I only went 1 for 9 and dropped from 397 to 393. Didn't even lead the league because that's the year Bill Terry hit 401. My salary was $19,000 in 1930, the year I hit 393. I tried to get a $1,000 raise that winter, but without success. They finally agreed to $800 expense money, whatever that meant, but they still never gave it to me anyway. Ruth was the highest paid at the time at $80,000. That seemed like an enormous figure, but nobody begrudged him because we all knew he deserved it. And the more he got, the more he would get. I think Al Simmons was the next highest. He had a 3-year or $100,000 contract with the Chicago White Sox. We always used to ask Al which year he'd get the extra cent in, because if they gave him $33,333.33 a year for 3 years, they'd still owe him a penny. Because of Ruth, by the way, reminds me of a story that I was called Babe, because when I came up to the big leagues with Brooklyn, I was supposed to have said that I was going to hit like Babe Ruth. As with so many stories that sound good, it's just not so. The fact is, I got the nickname Babe way back when I was playing with Edmonton in the Western Canada League. My very first year in organized baseball, that was a popular champion flyweight prize fighter at the time named Babe Herman. And a Foghorn lady fan at Edmonton started calling me Babe, after Babe Herman the fighter, not after Babe Ruth. She yelled, "Go get him, Babe!" or "Get a hit, Babe!" so loud you could hear her all over the ballpark, and somehow the name stuck. Oh, before I forget, there's one more story I've got to tell you about Uncle Robbie. It's about the time he agreed to catch a baseball dropped from an airplane as a publicity stunt. See, Gabby Street, it had just caught a baseball drop from the top of Washington Monument. So we're going to top that in Florida in spring training by having someone catch a ball drop from an airplane flying over the ballpark with some reluctance. Robbie agreed to put on a mask and chest protector and be the hero of the hour. Heck, anything in Gabby Street could do, Robbie figured the catcher of the Baltimore Orioles could do even better. The first 2 times the plane flew over the ballpark, and Comerford, the clubhouse man, dropped a baseball, and both times he completely missed the field. The ball couldn't come within half a mile of the ballpark, unfortunately. Dan had taken only 2 baseballs up with him, so he either had to come up and back down and get it more to forget the whole thing. However, while he was trying to decide what to do, he noticed a sack of Florida grapefruit in the plane. In the early days in Florida, everybody had a sack of grapefruit. So the pilot had circled around and made another approach, only this time Dan dropped a grapefruit instead of a baseball. Well, down in the ballpark out nearby a second base, Robbie is also circling around, getting a bead on this going in a thing as it falls. As far as he knows, as anybody's besides Dan knows, it's a baseball that's falling, not a grapefruit, and Robbie is determined to catch it. Get away, Robbie!" he yells. I got it! And then squash! It smacks right into Robbie's mitt and literally explodes. Juice and pulp splashing into Robbie's face all over him. The force of the thing was so great that it knocked Robbie down, and all he knew it was that he had all this liquid and stuff all over him. "Help, help!" he shouted. "I'm bleeding to death, help me!" Some players called him Grapefruit it forever after. It was his nickname he never lost. Uncle Grapefruit, hee hee. I was traded from Brooklyn after the 1931 season, partly because Uncle Robbie was let go at the time, and partly because I was still feuding with the front office over the $800 expense money they promised me, but they never delivered, as well as over a proposed cut in salary. I played with the Reds and Cubs for a few years, and then returned home here and there. Here played with the Hollywood Stars in the Pacific Coast League from 1939 through 1944. 1945, near the end of World War II, I even came back to Brooklyn as a pinch hitter for a few months at the age of 42. First time I came up as a pinch hitter at Ebbets Field in 1945. The bases were loaded, and I hit one off the right field screen to drive in 2 runs. However, I slipped rounding first, and wouldn't you believe the headline in the paper the next day? It never said a thing about the 2 runs I drove in. Instead, it read, "Same old Herman trips over first base." Over first base. I guess the 3 men on third inspired from hilarity than anything else. In those years, you know the old taxi driver story, don't you? A cab is driving by Ebbets Field, and the cab driver sticks his head out of the window and yells up at a spectator. "How's the game going?" "The Dodgers have 3 men on base," the spectator shouts back. "Which base?" the cabbie asks. Everybody blames me for 3 men winding up on third base, but it wasn't my fault. Actually, it was Danny Vance who caused the whole mess. We were playing the Boston Braves in 1926. The score was tied at 1 in the bottom of the 7th inning. I came up to bat with the bases loaded. Hank DeBerry was on third base, Vance on second, and Chuck Fuster on first. Well, I had a line drive to right field and slid safely into second with a double. But while I'm on the ground, I looked up and saw a run down and between third and home. Naturally, I figured Chick Fuster is caught in a rundown, so I get up and sprint for third like I'm supposed to. That way, we'll have a man on third, even if Chick is tagged out. But when I got to third, Fuster was already there, which surprised me. And then here comes Vance into third from the other side. That really surprised me because I thought he'd score long ago. After all, he was on second, and even if you're slow as a turtle, you should be able to score from second on a double, especially when the first throw was to second base on me. Anyway, we were all on third, or at one out at one in the same time. Vance was declared safe, and Fuster and I were both out. If there were just any injustice, Vance would have been the one declared out because he's the one who caused the traffic jam in the first place. But down through history, for some strange reason, it's all been blamed on me. Ironic isn't it? When you realize that I drove in the winning run with that hit, we won the game 4-1, and the double scored DeBerry with the go-ahead run. Only time I can think of when a fellow drives in the winning run and the press makes him a goat instead of a hero.